the system of symbolic instruction, the lectures of the English lodges, which are far more philosophical than our own, although I do not believe that the system itself is in general as philosophically studied by our English brethren as by ourselves, have beautifully defined Freemasonry to be a science of morality veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols, but allegory itself is nothing else but verbal symbolism. It is the symbol of an idea, or of a series of ideas, not presented to the mind in an objective and visible form, but clothed in language and exhibited in the form of a narrative. And therefore the English definition amounts, in fact, to this, that Freemasonry is a science of morality developed and inculcated by the ancient method of symbolism. It is this peculiar character as a symbolic institution, this entire adoption of the method of instruction by symbolism, which gives its whole identity to Freemasonry, and has caused it to differ from every other association that the ingenuity of man has devised. It is this that has bestowed upon it that attractive form which has always secured the attachment of its disciples and its own perpetuity. The Roman Catholic Church is, perhaps, the only contemporaneous institution which continues to cultivate, in any degree, the beautiful system of symbolism, but that which, in the Catholic Church, is, in a great measure, incidental, and the fruit of development, is, in Freemasonry, the very lifeblood and soul of the institution, born with it at its birth, or rather the germ from which the tree has sprung, and still giving it support, nourishment, and even existence. Withdraw from Freemasonry its symbolism, and you take from the body its soul, leaving behind nothing but a lifeless mass of effete matter, fitted only for a rapid decay. Since, then, the science of symbolism forms so important a part of the system of Freemasonry, it will be well to commence any discussion of that subject by an investigation of the nature of symbols in general. There is no science so ancient as that of symbolism, and no mode of instruction has ever been so general as was the symbolic in former ages. The first learning in the world, says the great antiquary, Dr. Stukely, consisted chiefly of symbols, the wisdom of the Chaldeans, Phoenicians, Egyptians, Jews, of Zoroaster, Sanchoniathon, Pharisides, Cyrus, Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, of all the ancients that is come to our hand, is symbolic. And the learned Faber remarks that allegory and personification were peculiarly agreeable to the genius of antiquity, and the simplicity of truth was continually sacrificed at the shrine of poetical decoration. In fact, man's earliest instruction was by symbols. The objective character of a symbol is best calculated to be grasped by the infant mind, whether the infancy of that mind be considered nationally or individually. And hence, in the first ages of the world, in its infancy, all propositions, theological, political, or scientific, were expressed in the form of symbols. Thus the first religions were eminently symbolical, because, as that great philosophical historian Grote has remarked, at a time when language was yet in its infancy, visible symbols were the most vivid means of acting upon the minds of ignorant hearers. Again, children received their elementary teaching in symbols. Was an archer? What is this but symbolism? The archer becomes to the infant mind the symbol of the letter A, just as, in afterlife, the letter becomes, to the more advanced mind, the symbol of a certain sound of the human voice. The first lesson received by a child in acquiring his alphabet is thus conveyed by symbolism. Even in the very formation of language, the medium of communication between man, and which must hence have been an elementary step in the progress of human improvement, it was found necessary to have recourse to symbols, for words are only and truly certain arbitrary symbols by which and through which we give an utterance to our ideas. The construction of language was, therefore, one of the first products of the science of symbolism. We must constantly bear in mind this fact of the primary existence and predominance of symbolism in the earliest times. When we are investigating the nature of the ancient religions with which the history of Freemasonry is so intimately connected, the older the religion, the more the symbolism abounds. Modern religions may convey their dogmas in abstract propositions. Ancient religions always conveyed them in symbols. Thus there is more symbolism in the Egyptian religion than in the Jewish, more in the Jewish than in the Christian, more in the Christian than in the Mohammedan, and lastly, more in the Roman than in the Protestant. But symbolism is not only the most ancient and general, but it is also the most practically useful of sciences. We have already seen how actively it operates in the early stages of life and of society. We have seen how the first ideas of men and of nations are impressed upon their minds by means of symbols. It was thus that the ancient peoples were almost wholly educated. In the simpler stages of society, says one writer on this subject, mankind can be instructed in the abstract knowledge of truths only by symbols and parables. Hence we find most heathen religions becoming mythic, or explaining their mysteries by allegories or instructive incidents. Nay, God himself, knowing the nature of the creatures formed by him, has condescended, in the earlier revelations that he made of himself, to teach by symbols, and the greatest of all teachers instructed the multitudes by parables. The great exemplar of the ancient philosophy and the grand archetype of modern philosophy were alike distinguished by their possessing this faculty in a high degree, and have told us that man was best instructed by similitudes. Such is the system adopted in Freemasonry for the development and inculcation of the great religious and philosophical truths, of which it was, for so many years, the sole conservator. And it is for this reason that I have already remarked that any inquiry into the symbolic character of Freemasonry must be preceded by an investigation of the nature of symbolism in general, if we would properly appreciate its particular use in the organization of the Masonic institution. Excerpt from The Symbolism of Freemasonry, Albert G. Mackey.